All right, class, let's finish up our discussion on viruses with a few loose ends. And we're also going to touch on a few things that are non-virus infectious agents that are also linked to the spread of disease. So let's talk about viruses and human health. Viruses can cause a lot of infections in human beings. We can have acute infections. Those include things such as cold, hepatitis, chickenpox, influenza, herpes, or warts. We can have a prominent viral infection. These prominent viral infections are going to cause a notable effect on a population and a specific geographic area. And then from there it can spread to the rest of the world. These prominent viral infections are now present worldwide, but were first isolated from that specific geographic region that they're named for. So we can have the dengue river virus, the Rift Valley River fever infection, or we could have yellow fever. AIDS infections that have very high mortality rates or very high death rates, so that you have a very low chance of surviving, includes the AIDS virus and the Ebola virus. And infections that can cause a long-term disability include polio or neonatal rubella. Some infections or viruses have been connected to chronic infections, such as type 1 diabetes, multiple sclerosis, specific cancers, Alzheimer's, and obesities. And I should emphasize here that there's a connection, not causation. So there's been correlation, not causation, established in these situations. Here is a big figure with a lot of different viruses and the specific disease caused by those viruses. And you can notice that there's a lot of small font here. If you are super interested in viruses and the diseases that they cause, this is an excellent figure for you to print up individually and zoom in on. I am putting this here as an FYI. I'm not going to be pulling test questions from this specific table, 5.6. So let's look at how we treat animal virus infections, so infections from viruses in human beings. First of all, we do not use antibiotics. Antibiotics treat bacterial infections. To treat a virus, we need to use an antiviral drug, not an antibiotic drug. Antiviral drugs are typically going to associate the mechanism of viral reproduction. So we're going to target something in the host cell that the virus needs to reproduce. Usually, this is going to be the ribosome, and in some situations, this is going to be a specific component that's only present in the virus. Particularly if we have a reverse transcriptase-based virus, if we have a drug that targets only reverse transcriptase, that drug will only target the virus and not the host cell specifically, but those drugs are primarily still in development. Most of our antiviral drugs are just going to target viral reproduction generically, specifically the ribosomes of the human cells generically. Understandably, if we make it so that we can no longer make proteins by targeting our ribosomes, our virus will not be able to reproduce, but there's going to be a lot of very severe, very profound side effects in the human cells, because our human cells also need proteins to live, and if we can't make the proteins we need to live, we start getting sick. So it's kind of a darned if you do, darned if you don't situation with regards to taking an antiviral drug. Obviously, talk to your healthcare provider. We can also have a DRACO or DRACO. This is a double-stranded RNA-activated capsase oligomer. A capsase cascade is typically associated with the self-destruct sequence in the cell. This capsase cascade is going to be triggered by the double-stranded RNA-activated capsase oligomer and will cause the cell to initiate apoptosis or self-destruction. So this causes a cell that's been infected with the virus to destroy itself. And if the cell commits suicide, so to speak, it can no longer make more virus particles or virion particles. The best line of defense against a virus is not getting infected by the virus in the first place. On that line of thought, a vaccine is very valuable against a viral infection. The downside is there's a very limited number of viruses that have vaccines associated with them. So, concept checked. Are antibiotics good for treating viral infections? True or false? Go back a slide a little if you want to check the answer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The answer is false. Antibiotics do not treat viral infections. We also have some things that can cause infections that are very, very tiny, non-cellular agents, but they are not viruses. The most common or most well understood of these is a prion, a protein-based disease. One of these prion-based diseases is called spongiform encephalopathy or encephalitis. This is where the brain develops a sponge-like appearance if you look at its gross anatomy. It's implicated in very chronic or persistent diseases in human beings. The brain tissue removed from affected organisms will, as I just mentioned, resemble a sponge. These diseases have a very long period of latency before the very first clinical signs can develop. So there's a long period after infection where the host organism doesn't develop those symptoms. In almost every situation, these diseases get worse over time and end in death. A good example of a spongiform encephalopathy that is being removed from the roster of diseases that infect human beings is one that's been associated with human cannibalism in Papua New Guinea. This disease was passed from the brain tissue of the victims, and as the victor ate the victim's brain tissue, the victor would, unbeknownst to themselves, inoculate themselves with a prion that years later would slowly start to destroy their brain. Since cannibalism was outlawed in Papua New Guinea several decades ago, the rates of that particular spongiform encephalopathy have dropped off very dramatically. There are very, very few individuals left alive in Papua New Guinea who practiced human cannibalism before it became illegal in Papua New Guinea. And those individuals, as you can imagine, are very aged in nature, and many of them are exhibiting symptoms of the spongiform encephalopathy because some of their victims that they ate were infected with that prion, that protein-based disease. So a prion is a disease a prion is a protein that causes a disease. It's different from a virus. A virus is a combination of nucleic acids, proteins, and lipids. The prion is an individual protein molecule that can cause disease. These prions can be deposited as long protein fibril in the brain, and they don't have any nucleic acids, no lipids associated with them at all. In a human being, they can cause Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, and in this Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease in humans can be caused when a human being eats tissue from a cow that has been infected with bovine spongiform encephalopathy. We also have satellite viruses. These satellite viruses, generally speaking, are viruses that need another virus for replication. So they are piggyback viruses, so to speak. A classic satellite virus is the adeno-associated virus, AAV. Those are viruses that are originally thought to only replicate in cells that have been infected with adenovirus. It's later been found that these adeno-associated viruses can also infect cells that are infected with other viruses that have had their DNA disrupted through viral or other potential means. And then finally, the new kid on the block is the delta agent. This is the most recently discovered infectious particle that is a non-viral infectious particle, and this is the least well understood infectious particle. Delta agent, generally speaking, is a naked circle of ribonucleic acid, RNA, and it's only going to be expressed in the presence of a hepatitis B virus infections, and this delta agent will, generally speaking, increase the severity of the liver damage caused by the hepatitis B virus. We also have viroids. A viroid is a virus-like agent that can parasitize plant cells. It's about 1/10 the size of an average virus, so these are going to sometimes be down into the 1 or single-digit nanomer size. These are going to have naked strands of RNA that don't have the capsid or any other kind of coating, and can be a significant pathogen for very economically important plants: tomatoes, potatoes, cucumbers, citrus trees, chrysanthemums, so on and so forth. A viroid is very similar in nature to the delta agent, but viroids have been documented and understood for a significantly longer period of time than the delta agent has been. So, concept checked. Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease and bovine spongiform encephalopathy are caused by prions. Which of the following best describes a prion? Is it A, a viral particle, B, naked DNA, C, infectious proteins, D, small bacterium, or E, naked RNA? If you don't know the answer, pause the video and rewind, or check your notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The answer is C, infectious protein. That's all we have on viruses. If you have any questions, shoot me an email or post it on the discussion board. Happy studies!